All right, you guys, as we get close to wrapping up season 3, we have one more kind of counseling with Shannon. And today we're just having a conversation about the idea of pruning. This is fun for me. I first learned about this term when I worked in wine and kind of what it means in terms of winemaking and viticulture and stuff like that. And it is such a spot on analogy for what we do as humans who are overextended. Just living in this constant state, which I know you resonate with, of exhaustion and just sort of looking at why is this overstretch, overcommitment the status quo, and do we want it to be our status quo? And if we don't, what does it look like to really prune when we have real responsibilities? And we really want to live a full life. Like, how do we live a full life and also prune things out at the same time? And why should we? There's really, we give you some of our best practices. There's no real like home run, 1, 2, 3 ABC solutions here, but we talk through what's hard for us and we talk through what's worked for us. And so hopefully, as I'm personally going into a season of slowing, of pause, and really a season that's demanding pruning, it's been a huge topic, I think, among our guests this season too, which is why I kind of wanted to land here. And I know that it will be relevant to so many of you. So I'm so grateful that y'all join us for these. Again, it's fun. I just want it to be an hour where you feel like you're not the only one feeling that you need this. That's why we do it. That's why we're talking about it for ourselves. So if you do feel overrun, overstretched, if pruning feels like, oh my gosh, I would give anything to just to cut out some of the excess and have a little more margin. That's what we're chatting about. So hopefully this resonates with you. Hopefully there's a few little how-to solutions that have worked for us. And I just thank you for always joining us here in the studio for kind of counseling. We just love doing it. We love spending time with you in that way. So enjoy this last episode for season 3 with Shannon and me. Okay, guys, we're back with another kind of counseling. I think this is number 5. I think it's 2 for this season.
I think you're right.
Which is awesome. And I'm really excited to sort of wrap up season 3 with this. We may have one more episode following, but as I go into sort of baby hiatus this summer, we were just hanging and being like, okay, what do we really like? What have we been talking about in general? Like Marco Polo text when you come to see my new patio, which was so much fun this spring to sit outside, like what's the stuff we keep coming back to just like deal with, I guess, with each other and like
ongoing things,
pray for each other for and stuff like that. And so the idea of pruning is kind of where we landed, which we'll talk about what that means in terms of our lives. For me, it's cool because it's like originally a viticultural term, which I don't even know if I like said that to you until I was getting ready. I was like, oh man, that's so cool. And as a biblical,
I was going to say the biblical
teaching from Jesus. So that's kind of what we're going to speak on today. And I think Shannon wants to clarify, this is definitely more like these are friends chatting. This is friend hat, maybe less than counselor hat.
This is what I'm working on in therapy. So that's why it's kind of
counseling. But I don't know. It just feels like kind of what this came from too is I listened to an interview with a woman named Jess Conley who had a book come out recently, which I can't wait to read. It feels like it will be applicable to having a newborn, which is called Tired of Being Tired. So haven't read the book yet, full disclosure, but I've listened to a couple of her interviews and started following her. And that's sort of her whole deal is like, how do we address this chronic issue of exhaustion and over committing and overdoing and just like being tired of being tired. And in one of her interviews, she references some meme that I don't y'all might have seen, you might have seen, that just says, I'm sure there's 100 versions of it, like that adulthood is this cycle of saying like,
oh gosh,
I just have to get through this week over and over again until you die.
Yeah. I've seen this.
So that was part of her thing, and it kind of led me to think like, why is this so funny and relatable? Like, why is this the norm? Like, should it be the norm? Like, should it be the status quo? Because I feel like for most of us, it is.
Yeah, I would think for most people that is very true.
Regardless of why, like regardless of what your season or circumstances are. I feel like you hear that from people who have kids and don't have kids, from people who have full-time jobs who don't have full-time jobs. Like it doesn't really even matter what the optics are.
Yeah.
It's just like, this resonates with most people. And so, like, how have we gotten there, and how, like, would the concept of pruning work versus, like, we talked about, how do we, like, should we talk about rest? And it's like, are those the same? Are they not the same? And, like, how does pruning maybe get us to a place where snippets of rest are even possible?
Yes. Okay, real quick. I want you explain pruning from the wine side.
Yes.
And then I'll explain from the therapy side.
Yes. Great.
Yes.
Okay, we didn't even plan that, but I am really excited because I said pruning, the first time I ever learned the term, I guess the first time I heard it would be in the Bible. We talked about
Yes.
It's a teaching of Jesus, John 15. I'm the vine, you are the branches. And there's a verse in that whole section that says that God prunes. Well, I'm just going to botch it, so I'm just going to read it. But he says, I am the true vine, and the Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, but the branches that do bear fruit, he prunes so that they'll be even more fruitful. So I think that's probably the first time I heard it, not knowing what it means.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, like, when I was studying wine and working in wine, and especially interning in Napa for that fall that I did that in 2013, wow. Whoa. That is a vintage I did not want to throw out. But anyway, when I was there and, like, in the vineyards and stuff, it's such an integral part of not necessarily winemaking, but the viticulture that then gets you to grapes of quality that can actually make wine. So, I mean, the idea of pruning anything, like if you have a garden, you prune, you cut back the parts that essentially restrict maximum flourishing.
Yeah.
So in the vineyard, you don't prune the branches and the vines that don't have the potential to yield beautiful fruit. You prune the ones that have all the potential. So you go back, and the goal is really to decrease the volume that comes out in order to increase the quality.
Yeah.
And then the kind of subset of that, which I think is important and applies in our little metaphor, is you also do it to manage disease and damage. So, like, left to their own, I mean, grapevines are very vigorous. Like, we grew up in the South. I feel like my grandparents had, like, tomato plants, you know, and they get, like, out of control where it's like 25 to 1, like, leaves to tomatoes kind of thing. And grapes do the same thing. So it is to maximize the quality, but it's also to protect it and to not let it get damaged and rotten and all this stuff. So there's a cool quote when I was looking back on, like, some of my viticulture notes from, like, a decade ago, that just says that. It says, left on its own, a grapevine will sprawl and spread itself out. It will ripen so unevenly that it will lack the intensity of flavor to make great wine. So basically, like, it will spread itself so thin that what it does have to give isn't even worth giving. It's not even worth turning into wine. So that's the viticultural background. And obviously it's a risky thing to do, because you're like, as a vintner, you know, you're looking at it and you're like, man, I have all this fruit, but, like, I'm going to roll the dice and cut 30% of it off, cut 30% of my yield and my profit and my income, to just hope that what happens is better quality. So that's the long version of that.
It's funny, as you're talking about this, I'm like, man, we prune a lot of things, actually. Like sourdough. I've been making sourdough. You have to, like, throw out the discard, otherwise it'd get too big.
Do you really?
Yeah. Yeah, you throw out all the discard and then, like, feed what is left for it to grow again.
So all the starter people out there.
With herbs too, you know, like, you're like, anyways, just thinking about all the things. Like, like, herbs will get bitter if you don't trim.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they get, like, a bunch at the top, and they'll flower eventually. Yeah. Some of them, like cilantro, I think, have 0 green thumb.
Yeah. Also,
all of mine turned bitter.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I'm sure everyone can kind of draw this metaphor. But I feel like I heard the term pruning outside of a biblical term for the first time, like, I want to say, like, 5 or 6 years ago. And they were talking about, it was a friend saying, I'm just in a season where I have to prune friendships because some of them just are not, there's, like, nothing coming from them, and it's time spent and nothing reciprocated, and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think we've all really used that term a lot lately. Like, we've been talking about it in our just in life. Like, how do we prune the excess? Like, life is so busy. How do we get rid of and cut off what isn't necessary so that we can be a better version of ourselves?
Yeah.
And happy and rested and grounded. And it is so hard.
Yeah. Or fruitful. Like, cut off what isn't fruitful. And it actually, like, makes me think of, there's a person whose name I forget, who's, like, one of the big kind of forefront of the, like, minimalist movement, like, in terms of design and stuff. I'll never remember the name. But their sort of qualification that I've read several times in different things is, like, is it fruitful, or, like, does it pour in or help you achieve what your goals are, or is it beautiful? And the point of me saying that is, I think that I always, when I first heard it, I really appreciated that this person added the "and beautiful."
Yeah.
Because I think, like, we have the tendency in these conversations to kind of go a little too, like, too minimal, too utilitarian, like,
a little selfish, maybe.
Yeah. And, like, exactly, like, in everything we've talked about with boundaries, it's like, not everything that we're committing to or doing, you know, has to strictly add to or, like, be a necessity, you know? I mean, that's definitely a benchmark.
Against, like, everything we believe as Christians too, like, we have to give as well. But yes,
but I just appreciated that, like, one of those filters can be beauty that pours into.
Yeah.
So that just came to mind. That wasn't
that's
even
really
the point.
beautiful. I'm glad you brought that up.
Where'd you hear it, or what does it mean in the therapy terms you mentioned?
Well, I probably should have been careful even saying that. It's not something we didn't learn this in school. Like, the term pruning is not something that I'm sure therapists know it, but it's not like a therapy term.
Right.
No.
Theory or something.
Boundaries is probably how we would, but the idea here is less boundaries and more like, okay, when there is excess, how do I, kind of trim that down? So yeah, I had never really heard it. I heard it outside of therapy for the first time.
Okay, cool.
I'm just kind of putting it into a emotional
viewpoint. So I guess, like, my question and what I've been thinking about is, before we even get to how do I know what is excess? Like, how do I know what is not contributive and what is not beauty in a healthy way? Like, why is this even a conversation? Like, what causes us to accept this cycle? And I mean us, like,
everyone,
all of us, not just you and me sitting here, accept this cycle of kind of living in exhaustion, of living in this meme, like, as the norm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is kind of the question.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because everyone does it. Like, it feels like everyone is exhausted. Everyone is pushing 100%, if not more. I think it's different for each person.
I think so too.
I think ultimately, if I had to say, it's an avoidance of, like, feeling what we have to feel. But, like, but why do you do it? Like, some people want to be productive. It feels really good to be productive. Some people want to feel wanted, so they're with friends all the time. Some people want to feel like they're pushing with nutrition and working out because it, not that that's bad to work out, but, like, it's almost like, I think we say busy to numb.
Yeah.
Like, if I had to boil it down.
Yeah,
I know that it's nuanced.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I would think.
I think it is. And like you said, it kind of, like, everyone's reason and motive for that is unique. And so
it is.
I guess that's an important kind of filter question. If you're like, man, this is something I need to do, and I need to figure out how, that would be a good sort of entry point to kind of sit down and be like, okay, again, what's my why? Like, what's my core why? Like, we've talked about the Enneagram. We've talked about, like, filters for the new year and things like that. And that probably is a very informative place to start, is, like, when I'm saying yes, when I'm overdoing, when I'm collapsing or snapping on my family or whatever I'm doing, why did I agree to that to begin with?
100%.
Yeah.
This is something that I've been practicing actually on my own, is, why am I saying yes?
Yeah.
Like, what is my reason? Because we are in a season where the kids have a bunch of stuff. They have their friends. We have our friends. We're meeting new friends at a new school. I have all my close friends. And, like, we could go literally every day of the week if we wanted to. We would collapse. So I've really, really tried, not perfectly, but been like, why am I saying yes to this?
Yeah.
And, like, is it a good reason? Like, is it grounded in something that feels like beneficial and beautiful and like, you know, kind of aligns with our goals?
Yeah. I think when I stopped to think about it, the 3 that I landed on, which probably, now that you frame it that way, all probably go back to one of my big whys at the end of the day, which I hope people resonate with. I feel like a lot of accepting this is guilt.
Yeah, 100%.
For whatever reasons, yours are. Expectations, which again, I think all these are kind of tied together. And fear, honestly. And I mean, what I mean by that is, the guilt, I think maybe is something we're more familiar with, especially as women, I think, for some reason. Maybe that's not
people
fair.
Down,
yeah, you don't
hurt
wanna,
their feelings.
You don't want to let people down. Like, and there is, and that's good. Like, there is a core to that is, I want to commit to this to be there for my friend. I want to commit to this to, celebrate this thing with my family. I want to commit to this because I want my kids to have good friends.
Yes. Yes.
And all those motives are good, but they definitely can lead to maybe a warped sense of guilt when you feel that the necessity is yes to everything, or like that.
Well, when you're driven by the guilt.
Right. And just straight up, like you said, productivity shame, I feel like, is a thing.
Yeah.
That I don't know if it's like completely cultural. I mean, I know it is very cultural. I know certain people, feel it more strongly than others. Like that's a thing that I have to battle. And with that, I think this guilt of, this is what I've tried to pay attention to and just realize how many times in a day I say, or I hear someone say, like, their shoulds. I've realized can kind of be a flag to pay attention to, and that maybe like something as simple as not shoulding yourself could help you.
Don't should all over yourself. Yeah, that's what I tell people.
That is funny. No, that's great. And just, I mean, truly the language of like, oh, I should have done that, or I should have done it this way.
Yeah.
And switching that to like, yeah, I could have done that, but also look how good it is. Like, look how fun it was.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I could have set the whole table and gotten real flowers because my parents came over to cook out Cinco de Mayo. But I also could have used the paper plates, and then I got 10 more minutes with them instead of having to clean up everything and run the dishwasher. Like,
100%.
Would Niecy have loved to use the pretty blue, Country Estates plates?
She
yes. But did she love sitting with me on the patio and me making her margarita more? Probably.
Yeah, let's talk about pruning real quick. We had this conversation with friends last week. They came over, and I was like, it was a Sunday. Brennan had been out of town, and we were talking about levels of friendship, and I pulled out paper plates and paper towels.
Yeah,
like not even like cute napkins, like paper. And I was like, you guys are level 1 friends now, because if I am inviting someone over and they expect, or I feel the pressure to put out my nice stuff with kids, right?
Nice
when there's
paper
little
napkins,
with my nice paper napkins, then you're a level 2 friend.
Yeah.
So, it's a silly analogy, but truly,
but it's
true. Worth looking into. Do you feel like you have to impress people? And if you're in that place, like, some people love hosting. So, you know. And I like setting out pretty stuff.
I do too.
But we had 4 children running around. Yeah. And we ordered, I don't even remember. Can't even remember what we ordered. But it's like, those are the little things where you can should yourself and be like, it would have been nice. Maybe they would have been impressed. But you have to check in. What's my intention here?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it to impress them, or is it to connect with them?
Yes, exactly. That's part of the why, I think, too. And that's what I've dealt with, like, being someone who loves to, I don't even know, like, if I use the word host and entertain, because that's not ever been my...
Well, I think you actually have
like
the core.
Beautiful tablescapes, like, and I think they're lovely, but like
that's not hosting though,
right?
That's entertaining.
Okay, yes. So
you
maybe
host.
Not an entertainer, so host.
Yes,
but there were seasons where I would be like here and there and like look up and realize that like people had been here for an hour and I hadn't really even like engaged with them.
Yeah,
and so I think for me, part of the again, and this is a very benign example we're giving, but like in the pruning of that experience, which I hope to never stop doing.
Yes.
It is here we go. Like, we get paper plates, and I'm not going to put it all in beautiful bowls because it's more important to me that you eat it hot than I put everything out and it looks beautiful and it's kind of cold.
And we hang out.
And we hang out.
Yes.
And so I just feel like, you know, those little shoulds can not just add up mentally, but like legitimately just take time. Like, think about those 10 extra minutes and how do you want to spend them? And I'm sure that is such a battle, you know, as a mom with kids, because what do you want? Like, what do you want the 10 minutes getting out the door to look like? You know, like, how can we let a few things, you know, slip by the wayside to make that whole experience more pleasant? I don't know.
All sorts of things. Well, that's another. But yes, I think you have to realize, actually, Brittany and I were talking about this last night with the kids of like, it just feels like now that they're older and they move all the time, like we're always going. Like we never just sit and hang out. Now, granted, they don't really sit very well.
Yeah.
But we were talking about how we will say no more often than we used to like Shepherd being like, let's go, you know, play swords out in the, like he has these little foam swords. And we're like, no, we got to get X, Y, and Z. And we're like, wait, why are we saying no to this? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just that, like, your mind is just in that homeostasis place of, like, go, go, go.
Yeah.
And just checking, like, why am I saying yes and why am I saying no, too?
Yeah. Well, this was a question that came up, too, sort of on this whole line of thinking, which I guess goes into sort of my expectations part of it, is, like, number one, whose expectations are they? Like, are they yours to begin with?
Yeah.
Because if they're not yours to begin with, then it shouldn't really be your parameter for the yes or the no.
Right.
Even though that's hard. I'm saying that like that's an easy thing to do.
It's very difficult, but it's a great point.
But, you know, whose expectations are they? And then if they are yours, then like you said, why are they there? Like, what's the why? Is the reason enough to, like, omit the things you're going to have to omit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of led me to the thought of, you know, we're always raised, and we should be, to give 100%. You know, people say, like, give 100%, give 110%. And I think the motive behind that is good, right? It just means work hard. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Says don't slack off. Like, give your best to your people. Like, the intention is good.
Yeah, it is good.
But I think my question was, like, is part of the pruning process accepting that as an adult, maybe in a way that is not true as a kid when you're taught these lessons that stay in your brain and in your heart? Like, is that worth reevaluating? Like, is it worth reevaluating? I have to do this 100% and trading that for, you know what, like, I can do this good enough.
Yeah, this is actually a huge thing that I feel like I talk to a lot of people. Like, good enough is okay, and that is very hard for people to accept.
It is. It's like hard for me to say because people are going to be like, oh, well, that'll lead to, like, being lazy, or that'll lead to slacking off, or that'll, you know, like.
Well, I think you have to differentiate between apathy, and, like, balance. Mm-hmm. Right? We actually can't give 100% all the time. It's not possible. Yeah. Like, we have energy reserves. Have we slept? Have we eaten? Yeah. Have we, like, are we mentally, like, we literally cannot. Yeah. And so, you know, there are certain things where, like, take parenting, for example. You can't be a perfect parent.
No.
You also can't give 100% all the time. And, like, there is this concept of good enough parenting where it's like, I'm human. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have apathy and be like, oh, whatever. Like, you'll figure it out. I'll go to therapy one day. But truly, like, I love you and I want to be here for you. But I am, like, you have to see me rest and take a break and take a breather sometimes too.
Yeah. It's hard for me to even pose that question, honestly, as, like,
so hard.
I'm sitting here suggesting, like, don't go above and beyond. Like, just do enough.
This is like your kryptonite. You're like, no, you do go above and beyond.
But I think that has to be, like, part of where the freedom and the margin begins. And that's not necessarily pruning out responsibilities, because part of, like, the expectation thing is, like, we just straight up have real responsibilities.
Yes.
Like, you can't dismiss those.
Yes.
But it's saying, it's again, to go back, like, the silly paper plate thing, it's like, that's good enough.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, compromise anything about what you want out of that
Yeah.
connection and event and engagement and
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And that's just such a hard mindset to embrace. And I think I'm just wondering a lot, like going into this season is what we've talked about. You asked me last time when we did the interview thing, the backwards interview, like, what are you most nervous about? And one of those things is sort of managing everyone's expectations of how you raise a child, you know?
Yep.
And I think as much as I know in my head, Connor and I will make our choices for our family.
Right.
And do so and share so, respectfully. But there's no way to not feel that.
Yeah.
And then that seeps into,
well, then this
saying
goes
the
back
yeses
to
and
the
overcommitting.
boundaries.
And that's boundaries.
And also, when people are there is pruning to be done here too, right? If you have people that are just not letting up on that and they are continually forcing their opinions and their thoughts on your parenting, even when you've had discussions, like that may be worth considering how healthy this relationship is in this season.
Right.
I'm not talking about a hard cutoff, but is this best for us right now?
Yeah.
And how is this helpful?
Yeah. That's one of the things too, I think that kind of led me to my third little motive, which really is fear. I think that's a lot of it. Fear of disconnection is kind of what you're referencing in this scenario, which we've talked so much about personally, just with busyness and with large groups of friends and large groups of people that we love that are now in different kind of places and positions in your life, and people whose families are close. Like it's literally a full plate. And so I think part of the fear, at least for me, and I'm sure for many in this conversation, is like, I don't want to cut those people off. Like, I don't want to lose those relationships.
Yeah.
And so I guess, like, does the pruning have to be cutting off, or can it be like a pause? I guess that's what I have been thinking a lot about.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I don't know if there's an answer that's like 100% true.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're talking about these relationships that it's like this, like, just doesn't feel like it fits in this season, it's kind of a test to like have space, because it could go either way. Right? Like you choose to have space and it could be like, yeah, nope, peace out, I'm done, from the other end. And that's hard. Like, that's why it's scary. I think that's why we don't set the boundaries we need to. But I think ultimately let me tell you this, because this is where I am right now in this season of doing a lot of this. I talked to my therapist about it and told her I felt very overwhelmed by this process, because we have a lot of friends and we have a lot of different, like, especially being in a new school and, families, all the things. She asked me this question, basically gave me this filter to look through when talking about investing time in relationships. And it's, is this person grounded, and in what? Right? Like, is this person going to be there and like be grounded with you and be that like anchor and safe space?
Yeah, that's good.
And the thing is I think sometimes, I think we sell ourselves short in friendship, but like there are a lot of people who will be that.
Yeah, who will be grounded.
Yeah, and I think it's scary to prune, like thinking, oh, well, we've always been close, but like I think you have to assess like what is actually happening here. Is this reciprocated? Are they grounded? Are they pouring into me? Am I able to pour into them?
Yeah.
And that it's hard. Like, this is tricky. Like, I'm saying this and my stomach is kind of like, oh gosh, as we talk about it.
I know.
But you can't, your friendships will expand and you can't handle it all.
Does the grounding like have to be the same? Or do they just have to be, when you're like looking in that example she gave you, like, are they grounded?
Yeah.
Do you need to be in the same ground? Or like, do they just need to be grounded and rooted in something?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
I think it's that. Like, I think it's a safety thing of like, you know who you are. You are grounded in that. And I like that. I like what you're grounded in. Like, we can share in that. doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the same thing. Like I have friends who are super grounded in Jesus and others who are like really grounded in like their mental health. And, you know, like there's just a safety there.
Yeah.
It's nebulous. Like it's for sure a nebulous concept, but it's hard. This is hard. It's hard to even talk about.
I love that example. Obviously, it goes back to even the vine, you know, and the branches kind of thing. But I just hope, I ask that because I hope people don't hear us say, like, when your life circumstances change, you're no longer, like, if your ground and your roots are in different seasons, then it's time to prune. Because I feel like you and I are the perfect example
I was just thinking that.
of that not being true. Because our lives couldn't have looked more different the last Several 6 years, you know? And even before that, like, you were 22 when you got married. I was 32 last year, you know? And, like, everything in that gap of 10 years looked really different. But the grounding was Jesus. The grounding was connection. The grounding was adventure. You know, all these things that didn't matter.
There were a lot of different things.
Yeah. And so I just don't want people to hear that. But I also want to acknowledge, like, that takes a tremendous amount of intention when your seasons are different. But it can flourish and thrive. But it is very difficult. Like, and I feel that a lot even now, just being like, I feel very in the middle of the people I love most in this life. All of our friends, like, are very much kind of the married for a while mom camp, just circumstantially. Yeah. And then pretty like single and available and travel. And, you know, they're just like, and I've always sort of felt in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult in ways, especially in this last, you know, year or so to adjust. But it's also really amazing in ways because I feel like I've always had shared ground with everyone. And you just have to make sure that you're intentional to honor those shared interests and like not make it surface level, you know, not make it about that.
Well, I think what you're saying is so important. You're talking about people being intentional. And I think that probably is the glue at the end of the day, is having two people who are really intentional with each other. And like you said, life could not be more different in so many ways, but we have always made an effort. And, like, we don't sit around and talk about the weather. It's like, no, dig in. Like, how are you actually? What are you struggling with? How can I pray for you?
Yeah.
And I think that is what I'm talking about when I say grounded. Like,
and is that a barometer for pruning? And it may not be for an individual. It may not be for somebody listening.
That's
like
true. I guess it
that
depends
may not be the interaction you want.
Your pruning may look like, can we do adventure together?
Yeah, we need to escape together.
Yes.
And that's fine too.
Yes. No, that's actually
a good point.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that.
I hadn't either.
Yeah, I think you have to figure out what you're looking for. What is the intentional relationship you're looking for? But at the end of the day, it's about intentionality.
Yeah, and I think what feels hopeful to me too, to kind of go back, this like fear of disconnect and fear of, I guess, permanent loss and all that, which happens, and that's a part of life, is that I think pruning, this idea, can sometimes be a pause too, you know, like it doesn't have to be a hard cutoff.
It does not have to be a hard cutoff.
Anything like that. I think I've had friends, and I would not even just friends, but like interests and other things and people and organizations and stuff I'm invested in, that it's never like, okay, now I'm done with it, I'm never gonna come back. But it's just, there can be a pause and sort of a putting it on the side.
Doesn't mean you never see them. It's just like, that's not where all your energy goes.
And that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of fear, like, as silly as this example is too, I know what happens, like, to numbers and engagement when you don't put out podcasts. And it's like, realistically, I could do that this summer from my home in a nursing bra, probably, you know, like on my computer. And I could, but to me, it's like the above and the beyond, the could and the should. But there is fear in that pause. Like, this isn't the end of this by any means, but the pause is scary. But I know to do and enjoy this phase of having a new baby, and to do my best to put out this content that matters to me. Like, both will be sacrificed if I try to do this in the meantime. Yeah. And a lot of people can. And the metrics would tell you should. And I hope everybody else is a little sad that I'm not, but supports it. You know what I mean? But there is that fear of pause, and it's not a forever hard stop, but that it's a pause. And like,
100%.
That's a thing we have to be okay with. And I think to kind of circle back to, I mentioned Jess Conley at the beginning of the episode. She says in an interview that I listened to, you know, she's like, in this idea of rest, in this idea of, she did use the word, I think, pruning at some point, or cutting excess was what you said. She's like, I'm very careful to not preach a prosperity version of that.
Yeah.
Like, not to preach a prosperity gospel version of that. And like, when you really prioritize rest, when you do create margin, when you do filter and prioritize things, that is inevitably going to hurt people's feelings. It is inevitably going to hurt the numbers, you know? Like, if you refuse to work on the weekends and that's what your company expects of you, like, you're not just going to magically get promoted. That's like not the reality. And you have to accept the cost of the pruning. You have to accept the cost of prioritizing rest, and that it's not, there's not like a pretty bow to put on it sometimes.
No.
And you have to know that.
Yeah. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because that's spot on.
Yeah.
Like, it's not this easy, beautiful process by any means. And you will like lose friends because of it. You'll probably lose a lot of things because of it. But ultimately, it's like, what are your goals? Like, what are you actually aiming for? And you just kind of got to keep your sights set on that.
Yeah. And I think to just prepare your heart for that, because it doesn't, feel good. It's not what you want from it. Like, you want the magic version where you cut back working on vacation and
everyone's so proud of you. You're doing so great.
And you set boundaries with people who are used to stepping all over them, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so glad you did that."
So happy you set boundaries.
It's not real.
It's not realistic.
Accepting that cost, I think, is an important part of this whole conversation. Which just sucks. Maybe that's part of being an adult that just sucks.
It is. It really is. It's, there's so many things fighting for our attention in this world. And it's like we're over-connected in a way. And we have so many opportunities to connect, to hang out. Then you have kids and they have like 800 things that they're doing. And eventually you realize, like, I'm just really exhausted. And then you find those people that you're like, this fills me up.
Yeah. And like, I'm losing the nourishment of this. This is like a thought that I've been on recently with several people we've interviewed, and I think just like being more aware of our days leading up to baby, and like kind of getting in the habits that we want to be in. And for some reason, the thought of like ingestion versus digestion has been on my mind. And when you say like we're over-connected and over-committed, and these are mostly good things. Like, I don't think we're accidentally committing to things that we hate most of the time. You know what I mean?
It's just like how much.
So to me, it's been like, okay, where's the line? Even social media, like, and just being on your phone. And I interviewed, the RO guy several weeks ago, and then Darren Whitehead, who's a pastor here, on his digital detox or digital fast. And so I think what I've been trying to sort of look at objectively is like all these things I'm taking in, even if it's just information.
Yeah.
That's good information. Where's the line where I'm really digesting it?
I know.
And where am I just like drinking from a fire hose? And that's a good place to start.
100%, because we're drinking from a fire hose every day. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And kind of just the less, it's just, it's the literal pruning, the less that you allow in, the more you're actually going to absorb.
Your life becomes more meaningful and intentional the less that you have going on.
What is something that you feel like has benefited you that maybe you've pruned or that you're trying to prune?
You really putting me on the spot there. Okay. There's like one thing in particular that's coming to mind. I have really evaluated lately if my friendships feel reciprocal. So this on a core level, I am a pursuer.
Oh, yeah.
If I love you hard. And I will go above and beyond for like the rest of our relationship. And that's just how I am.
Yeah.
I've always been like that. That's not changing. I just love really big. And I found myself in a few relationships where I'm like, this isn't reciprocal. And I don't expect people to pursue to the same level that I do because it's high. But like, we're not tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even angry about it. I just had to check in with myself. Like, you're finding people who do that. Like you've always pursued me back. And there are people that we hang out with that I feel like do a good job of pursuing me. And I'm like, why am I still putting so much effort into some of these relationships where it's just not reciprocated? And that's okay. Good for them. They're probably setting their own boundaries that they can't pour back. And that's okay. I've just had to kind of check in, and it's not a hard cutoff, but be like, that's not probably where I'm going to put my energy right now.
Yeah. I'm not going to keep pouring and pursuing to the same degree.
Yeah.
But I'm always here.
I'm always here.
When they're here.
I'm not going to disappear. But like.
I think that's a really good example that helps with the fear. Like that fear of disconnect, that fear of the hard stop. And that doesn't have to be the answer.
Yeah. I'm not like texting them and saying, I don't want to be your friend anymore. Right. It's just like, I'm not going to reach out every week and see how you're doing when you don't even respond.
And that feels freeing, even though it feels like it's kind of a hard.
It feels very freeing.
Cost. Okay, good.
And what's cool is that I think in the process, it's made more room for other people that we've met that I'm like, oh my gosh, like you pursue me back really well.
Yeah.
And this relationship feels very reciprocal and deep, and we're connected. You know what I mean? It's like it opened up space.
Yeah, open up space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what pruning.
Yeah.
I love that.
Precisely.
I think mine has a lot to do with the intake that I just mentioned. Like that's been on my mind.
Yeah.
And getting to
with
the place.
Information specifically?
Yeah, I think, and just like even as simple as not listening to as many podcasts or not reading 3 books at a time. And I know that sounds nerdy and silly, but it really but I do that. And it really has freed my mind to, commit to a new project that I've worked really hard on that comes out in the fall. And like my new book comes out in the fall. And so to have that be sort of a singular focus in a time when I'm usually having a lot of different inputs.
Your mental space feels clearer.
Yeah. And it just, as silly as it and obvious as it seems, I feel a lot more like what I'm putting into that has value. Good. It's not just like the last thing on a 8 tier list that just has to get done every day. And I've enjoyed it a lot more. And I think even going into this season, like this summer with the baby, I've tried really hard to get enough information without deep diving too much to where I feel overwhelmed and I'm not really absorbing anything that I'm reading about.
I feel like you've actually been really good about this.
Breastfeeding and, I got the moms on call, but I haven't read it yet.
That's like, okay. You don't have to.
No, I know. And so I just feel like that measuring that input has felt like a good thing to prune because I've been able to enjoy and savor.
Yeah, instead of having to do it all.
Instead of feeling like, I'm walking into the like baby SATs and I have to be ready for every question. You know what I mean? Like,
I've noticed how intentional you've been with that. Specifically, and instead of like researching, I feel like you reach out to friends.
Yes.
Because you're going to get a more like, just the internet is dangerous.
Yeah.
But I noticed there are things that you could totally Google that you'll like reach out to me instead. And I'm like, that's probably really smart. Yeah. And probably less overwhelming for you.
Yeah.
Like, hey, actually, you don't need 15 of those things on your nursery. I mean, your registry.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, cool.
Exactly. Like, that has been really helpful to me.
Yeah, you've been amazing at that.
It's been good. And even just, I've heard so many writers, I'm going on tangents now, just say that they've always written better in seasons where they're not on social media, not to like vilify social media, but it's just like,
it's true,
the more you're constantly inputting, the less you have to create an output.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so that's felt really good. But there's like a fear in that too, because you're like, where am I going to get inspiration? Like, where am I going to get information? And just kind of the beauty of, there is a beauty of learning as you go, I guess.
Oh, well, it's like the only way to actually learn, you know?
I remember actually, so when I started, now we're all tangents, but when I launched this show, Sean and Andrew from Family Made were one of my first or second guests, and just kind of asking them, it was right before after Connor and I got married. So I was kind of asking about their whole story and just like marriage advice and this and that. And Andrew just said very point blank, like, as much as we work on us, as much as we work on ourselves and like try to prepare for things that we know will be difficult or know that we'll have to deal with. Like, there really is nothing of greater value than to just do it one step at a time.
I feel like that is,
and I remember being
maturing,
like, dang,
you know?
yeah, I'm trying to like get all these nuggets and work ahead of the problems. And it's like, there really is no greater value to doing it one step at a time.
It's so true. And there's kind of like peace in that. Like, you're going to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just might as well, because every situation is different for every person too.
Yeah.
So no matter how much you research.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love to research.
Oh, I know. But it's hard. So I guess all of this I sort of want to kind of wrap at, this is so much of what we've discussed before, is the filters, the whys, and the intentions behind what we do. And again, acknowledging the cost of what is it really going to look like to prune and scale back in your life where you need to. Because it's not always a pretty bow on top of that decision, and that's okay.
Rarely is.
So I guess where I do want to land though is like when we've done hard work to do that as best we can, and we still kind of feel our wheels spinning, just like what helps you personally get through those weeks, you know what I mean? And not just like, if we look ahead and this week and next week and whatever really is a hamster wheel. Like we can't cut anything else out. It just is life.
No cutting.
It's the timing, it's the responsibility, and they're good things, and we're going to be tired. Like, are there things we can offer these listeners that help us to not just get through and actually soak in some of that joy? You know what I mean?
And it's so simple, but so hard. And it is planned stillness.
I like that.
So this can look like so many different things. It does not have to look like sitting with your legs crossed meditating, because let me tell you who can't do that, and that is me. But stillness can look like I'm going on a 20-minute walk every day without anything in my ears and just breathing and like checking in with myself. It can look like a girls' trip. These are my intentional girls. We're going away together and resting, and just like, it can look like going away with your husband. Like, I love it when Brent and I get to reset. It can look like taking a day to yourself. This day is blocked off and I'm not doing anything productive. I am just going to sit with myself. But it is, you have to plan.
Yeah.
Which it is what it is.
Yeah.
But you've got to, in a busy season, you've got to plan your stillness. And you have to just commit to it.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
I hate when I have to do I love it at the end of the day. But I sit there for the first hour and I'm like, what do I do with myself? Should I work out? Maybe I should be productive. And I have to unwind.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so wound up from the week that I'm like, I'm just going to sit here until I can. Yeah. For me, it's not sitting, it's walking.
Right.
That's where I like really can unwind.
Yeah.
But you've just got to carve it out.
And to know what that really restorative thing is for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it can be anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great answer. And I think just to like shamelessly kind of pitch my new book, which we just announced, there's 4 rhythms in it that I focus on. And the book is focused in grief because it's devotional for those who are in grief. But part of why it means so much to me is that those 4 rhythms I talk about, I learned in the valley in a really hard way. But now as I continue to like share this with people, and I've done several speaking engagements sort of on that content and on these 4 rhythms, they are so life-giving now. Like, they are muscles that I built in the really hard that now are the way that I do the really busy, even though the really busy is good. And so for me, they're, wail, which is just to grieve or acknowledge what's difficult, to worship, to connect, and to hope. And so having little tiny practices of that throughout the chaos, I think, they don't change anything about your physical or mental exhaustion that you're going through, but it is maybe a planned pause. Like,
it is
a pause to say, you know what, this is really hard.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And a pause to say, you know what, but here's why I'm really grateful, even in this tired. And a pause to say, I feel like I'm floundering. I need to Marco Polo this person to know that I'm not the only one. Yes. Or a pause to say, you know what, I can see the end of the calendar. There's hope. I only have 2 more weeks, like,
yeah, it's taking a beat.
Really, to take the beat. I guess that's it. It's the same thing.
Be still. Be still. Know that I'm God. Just be still. I also love what you just said about the building the muscle. Because if you can build the muscle of this practice, then like you have your ground. Like, that's where you stay grounded.
Yeah.
That's what holds you like to what your intentions are. It's a muscle.
Yeah. So build them now, I guess. Build them in your slow seasons. Like, build out the stillness, the intentional
build
stillness.
In your busy seasons too. You just gotta you gotta do it.
Man. Well, that's good. I hope that's helpful for everybody. It's helped us.
I know. Yeah, working on it.
A little bit.
Working on it. Yeah. I also feel like, as a side note, that we should get Marco Polo to sponsor your podcast, since we've mentioned it at least.
I know. That would be great if anyone wants to.
Do people know what this is?
I don't know, but I'm also feeling like a little self-conscious because I heard Annie Downs interview someone, I can't remember who it was, who's like in their early 20s, and they were like laughing about Marco Polo, that she was talking about it. And
well, we're not in our early 20s.
Really outdated? Like,
we are outdated. Marco Polo's fantastic. Still love it. What else would we do?
I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole here.
Marco Polo, check it out, especially if you're a busy mom.
But yeah, and I think that, just again as a side note, if they want to sponsor, has been a really sweet way to feel connected without having the exhaustion and demands that it would otherwise take to keep up with people.
You're talking about Marco Polo?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic because you get to it when you get to it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like still face to face. I mean, it's so much more than a text message or something.
Oh, I love it.
Anyway, sponsored by Marco Polo. So, I'm looking forward to slowness, even though I know my hours and days will not be slow, and they will be exhausting.
Yes.
But looking forward to a time when it is necessary to prune things.
Yes.
And that feels good.
It's actually the best season to prune, just so you know. I loved that season because it was like, sorry,
can't.
This is what I'm doing right now. Oh, goodness.
I hope this is encouraging. That is what I'm going into, and I know yours is a very different stage of life and pace of life, but like we said at the beginning, it's not even about really the stage or the circumstance. Yeah. It's just about that why, and about prioritizing, and about knowing, like, is this thing I'm choosing, even if my body's tired, like, is it pouring in or is it draining out?
Yeah.
And that's just been such a recurring topic with us. And this season, like every season of the show, when I go back and listen and like make notes on everything, they tend to have sort of this divine like current, of conversation. And this one has been, I think, really pruning and rest and input and output and all that kind of stuff. So it's been great.
An amazing, difficult thing.
Yeah. So I've loved it, season 3, and we'll be back again in the fall.
Woohoo!
Could be totally different. We'll see where we're going to be.
Probably have a baby in her lap.
Yeah, it could be real messy. Like, we're talking hardcore good enough, not above and beyond. So just get ready for that.
Can't wait.
And thank y'all for always being here with us. I know it takes, you give precious time to be here, and so I hope you feel seen and built up. That's what matters.
To be my best friend, talking about all the things we already talked about. It's fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Shan.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll see you next season.
See you next season.
In the fall.